Hello, everyone. I know everyone here, so I don't think there's no need for me to introduce myself. But I'm Akira, in case you guys haven't remembered my name yet. So nice to meet you all. So my presentation is about strategy to integrate SDGs in educational events, especially analyzing Kyushu Debate Open. So I think this Kyushu Debate Open has been committed to SDGs from last year. So what we did was we tied very close to what Sandeep has been doing in Hong Kong, probably. We tied motions with SDGs more specifically, but also tried to make the tournament more sustainable as a whole. And I think from a participant's point of view, for instance, especially the reactions from last year from debaters were, what is something new? So they see logos on PowerPoint slides when the motions were given, but I think it was something new. And today I'd like to talk about why we are doing this and what were the effects of doing this, because this is something innovative and new, and I don't think there was an opportunity to sort of deep dive into why we do this and how we do this, so that's the main track of my presentation. I'm not going to introduce myself, but very briefly, I'm currently, I used to debate in the University of Tokyo. I'm currently also serving as debate coach. I'm working as a consultant, but in that field, I'm doing sustainability strategy as well. So integrating SDGs as a part of corporate missions and corporate strategy has been my work. So I was wondering, what I thought last year was I could leverage that experience into Kyushu Debate Open to make Kyushu Debate Open more sustainable and unique. So that was one aspiration I had. And with regard to Kyushu Debate Open, I've been involved since 2014 with Professor Joshua Park, and I thought this was a great opportunity to sort of do that, especially given that SDGs is heavily connected to Kyushu Debate Open. I'm going to skip this slide. This is just an advertisement of my book. Okay, that was, people are supposed to laugh, but that was a bad joke. So, generally speaking, what are some key points of integrating SDGs in events and organization in general terms? Then secondly, I'm going to talk about what we did in Kyushu Debate Open. So those who are unfamiliar, SDGs is a goal, universal goal that has been set by United Nations through multi-stakeholders, including NGOs, including governmental officials in 2013. This is different from what was done before, which was Millennium Development Goals called MDGs. That did not get popular for numerous reasons. One, because it was popular, focused on developing countries as opposed to developed countries. And two, in terms of promotion of them as well, it did not have these fancy logos back then. No, this is very true actually, and very important. So it was something people felt as something from sustainability, something United Nations doing it, something uninteresting. But the difference here in SDGs were, firstly, it focused on global problem, both developed and developing countries, and it's a procedure to make these SDGs, and many multi-stakeholders were involved. Actually, one of my colleagues at a consulting firm used to work at an international NGO, and he himself was involved in processing SDGs as well. So that's the level of democracy it had when it comes to SDGs. Also, this logo, the person who came up with this logo took actually quite a lot of time deciding how we are able to promote sustainability, which is an issue that is very difficult to comprehend. So for debaters, it's very typically easier for us to relate to things like poverty, education, whatnot. But for other individuals, like ordinary, I should say, non-debate circuits, have sometimes not necessarily have awareness with regards to sustainability. So they made these cute logos, so it's much more easier for them to remember. So those things were something new, but of SDGs. And currently, Currently, many companies or many organizations are actually starting to commit to SDGs. So many global companies, whether it be, if you could name like 5 or 10 famous companies, probably all of them are committed to SDGs, including probably PepsiCo too. So companies like Toyota, for instance, from Japan is doing this. Airlines you're using, most of them should be committed to SDGs as well. Many universities are actually starting to commit to SDGs too. There are some official recognition, official ones that's there. Kyushu University actually, not officially yet, but I know there are some movements that's happening internally as well. So it's something that many organizations commit to, whether it's private or public or cities. So why does it happen right now? Why are SDGs and strategy becoming organizational strategy right now? I think this is due to several reasons. First, sustainability is vital for all events to continuously generate value anyways, because the mission that they have is somehow related to stakeholders that's involved. Which related to my second point, that not a single event operates in a vacuum, and you need to buy hearts and minds of stakeholders to create social values, whether it be corporations or NGOs. And SDGs, as I told you, sort of came as a global common language of sustainability. So that's why it's easier for people to come under this ecosystem, under SDGs, and becoming very easy, useful tactic to sort of align themselves with SDGs. And also, irrespective of any form of event, these, like, education in specific has strong tie with decent education, which is, oops, I keep on doing this. On education, which is number 4 of the goals, so that could be sort of used as a hint as well. Also, I should note that many organizations and events missions are closely related to sustainability when they were initiated in the first place. Whether it be NGOs, I think, is a very easy example, because their mission was to solve certain forms of social problems which are related to SDGs in the first place, so it's very easily related. Or even if you talk about, for example, any form of companies, they sort of started with some level of social issues in the first place. Even, for example, automotive companies, like that was the mission, for instance, that individuals move from one place to another in a convenient way, which is related to SDGs, for example, number 10. When you're talking about tutor schools, also it has controversy that related to SDGs number 4. So every company has certain form route to SDGs, so that's very easy to sort of translate and make it as their language to be narrated as their corporate mission as well. So these are basically the reasons that companies or any organization or education events as a whole is sort of committing to SDGs. So what do you do if you want to necessarily integrate SDGs into educational events? There are basically 3 steps that that's generally necessary, and something that we also did at Kyushu Debate Open. The first thing was define materiality. Materiality means social issues or SDGs, which is especially close to your heart. So what we did was we sort of looked at what are the components of debate tournaments as a whole, and what SDGs is especially important. So I think the example from Hong Kong on water was very one form defining materiality, because that was an issue in Hong Kong. So in order to explain this a bit, for instance, this is the materiality matrix of, I should call this one, Coca-Cola, for instance, the Coke company. What they define as materiality, which is at the right-hand corner, is things like obesity concerns, things like water sustainability, because that's very easy, that's something very important, because Coca-Cola uses water, it's also renowned for example, may cause obesities, those things, right? So it sort of comes with a combination as what stakeholders believe that's important and what they operate. So that's how companies often define materiality. So by using the same logic, educational events should sort of decide which priorities start from, because it's structurally impossible to do all 17 goals, and also you don't have to do all 17 goals as well. The second thing is to realize quick win. It's very, I think this sort of goes with any forms of organizations wanting to do new things, maybe even developing a community, like for instance in Vietnam. So you can't start large, unfortunately. There was limited resource. And there are oppositions to sustainability as a whole, because it takes time, it's sometimes costly, for instance, to do it as well. So what I did was start from initiatives which can start early with minimum resource allocation, with something that could be embedded in previous activities and operation, and something that's very easy to be understood. Those things is something as a key to start. Also, in these specific cases at the start, you may need to rely on external educators or professionals to sort of rely on this job because of limited resource. The third thing, or the key point of integrating SDGs, is to have stakeholders you have more communication channels with different types of stakeholders. So in terms of educational events generally, there's at least two segments, learners and teachers. But among themselves, there's different demographics within themselves too. So learners may be beginners, they may be experienced, they may be confident in English, they may not be. So there's many diverse form of learners. Even if you look at teachers, their language proficiency may be different, areas of expertise may be different. So there's many types of stakeholders that you necessarily have to involve and cater to each needs to sort of do integrate SDGs. So those were the main three things that educational events necessarily need to do in order to integrate SDGs based on the experience that I had in both consulting and both QBO. Let's talk at this bit more in a more grounded level with specific examples. So with regards to Kyushu Debate Open, why did we have the lens of SDGs integrated? There are several reasons to this. The first thing to say is the mission of Kyushu Debate Open was and is to provide debate opportunities, especially when it comes to international and educational events for Kyushu. So just a bit of background for non-Kyushu people. Kyushu is a region in Japan, well, you guys are over here, but with less debate population. So the debate population is concentrated more in Tokyo region, which is the capital of Japan. So people struggle, unfortunately, when you're doing tournaments or when you're running debate activities, we unfortunately have limited access to resource. Therefore, I think this started back in 2014 when we started Kyushu Debate Open, formerly Kyushu Cup, was to sort of have this equal opportunity of debates, or in Kyushu region as well. Not to have this inequality between, like, for example, Kyushu and Tokyo, which is this itself is closely related to reducing inequality, which is number 10 of SDGs, and also decent education, number 4. So from the beginning, from the high level, we felt that the heart of Kyushu Debates Open is closely related to the principle of SDGs. So I thought that was a big alignment that we could have. Also, pragmatically speaking, there were lots of stakeholders needs were unsustainable at the moment with regards to the lens of sustainability. So for example, when they talk about ORCOM, unfortunately, running an international tournament with a limited amount of resource was very difficult. So we had to rely heavily, for instance, on Professor Inoue to have the venue to be there, organize many things, and all those things had to come in place. So it was very unsustainable. Also from the beginning, ESS numbers were limited. So it was difficult to run international, even ordinary tournaments, and having an international aspect to it was even more difficult. And I don't know how this happens in other countries or other debating circuits, but in Japan, people in general do not want to do ORCOM because it's very simply tough, but it's not rewarding in many situations. They're often unpaid. They do it for volunteers, but there's sometimes heavy criticisms from the participants if something goes wrong. So I felt it was not sustainable from the first place. This is especially the case, which goes to second reason of ORCOM, if you don't have the purpose or reason to sort of engage to debate tournaments. Because in Japan, there are debate tournaments often held even every week, for example, October, November. If the tournament is not special for you, I don't think people will be committed and devoted to debate tournaments to be run. So I wanted something as a new, differentiating, unique factor to come in when I consider the pain and agony that ORCOM was going through. Secondly, sustainability as a whole is very related to participants' need anyway. For instance, if you take a look at number 10, which talks about reducing inequality among people as well, it's not people who come to debate tournaments is not simply from one demographics. So there are people with disability who wants to come, requires some extra care, I shouldn't say extra, some different care with regards to people without disability. We also had to meet dietary needs, such as vegetarians or halal, for instance. Those are also related, for example, number 3 of SDGs of health. So if thinking from SDGs perspective, sort of had a possibility to reassess, to sort of improve the quality of the participants it improves the quality of events from the participants' point of view. For debaters, what I felt would be beneficial was for them to effectively conduct research, because if you have to prepare for ordinary tournaments, you have to prepare and matter load for various topics. But when it says SDGs, it may have a narrower perspective where individual could start focusing on it. So I felt that could be one option as well, but also sort of have an opportunity to be in other people's shoes, because SDGs is heavily related to social problems all across the globe. So I felt was an opportunity to sort of look into it. I also have to note that SDGs I thought it would be beneficial for future debaters, including local residents, local high school students, who could be interested in debating but don't know nothing so far. But if you have SDGs tied to it, given its common language, people could be aware of these events. People could be knowing these events. I thought it would be a good branding strategy, and also to even promote to non-debaters outside of the circuit as well. For example, maybe university, maybe companies, because this is common language. So we do excellent, I think personally, being in the circuit for 10 years, debate is an excellent thing, but it's difficult to promote why debating is a good thing. So I felt SDGs could be a strategy in that manner as well. So what did we do? So we, for example, defined materiality as well. We felt quality education or decent work, responsible consumption, like production, partnership for goals were something important. So for instance, as I told you, decent work for ORCOM was something of a heavy problem that I wanted to rectify first. I also, in order to do real-life quick win, this is where I relied heavily on IAs and, for example, Joshua Park and other DCAs. Because one, if I were to sort of tie in motions or topics related to SDGs, that required extra amount of time, but that was able to be done. Demo speeches after debate, which is beneficial in terms of education. In Japan, this custom is not typical, but if it's abroad, it's relatively more typical. So I was able to ask IAs or DCAs to give out speeches from last year. Minimization of food loss. That was relatively easier to be done because it's about adding an extra question registration format, whether you want lunch and dinner and whatnot. So that was something we could have started from. In regards to stakeholders, we sort of did a creation of new positions as a sponsor officers, students officers to sort of cater to the needs of multi-stakeholders. So those were something we did to promote Kyushu debate open as a whole. And I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip some slides. So for instance, what we did last year was, for instance, we had, for example, we picked basically these 4 SDGs: education, decent work, responsible consumption, and partnership. With regards to education, we had a workshop for local junior high school who never debated before, so they could be attending Kyushu Debate Open as an opportunity. I know this was a big burden for students who were actually involved, but this was something appreciated from the community as a whole, and they actually participated. So I think this is something very important. With regard to decent work, so thanks to Professor Inoue, this organizing committee is officially approved for 4-credit course to run a tournament. Although that may not necessarily be perfectly compensated, I thought that would be at least rewarding for individuals who did this hard work. Also, what I personally did was to sort of, as much as I could, sort of try to transfer business frameworks which could be beneficial, such as project management, because that could be something that I was able to voluntarily give to students. For minimizing food loss, that's important. That was easy to do, so I'm going to skip it. I also involved NGOs and also academias to sort of support these initiatives for the first movers in SDGs, which I think was also promoted as well. So yeah, for instance, we did this support to locals. So we did many things. We did many things when you look at SDGs, as considering dietary restrictions, motion being tied to SDGs in workshops. We tried to have care for diversity in SDGs, and we care for equities. We also did zero food waste. Actually, there were no food waste this year. Congratulations to the work of ORCOM. We also did more sponsorship on all these things. So what were the benefits ultimately? I'm going to skip a few slides. To be honest, I think the result is still materializing, but I think there's something that I could say. First of all, from the perspective of Orcom, I think it's not perfectly rewarding yet, but I'm personally feeling this has created some form of new identity as unique tournament in Japan and unique tournament in Kyushu. I think it sort of helped crystallize the mission. And when I talked about SDGs last year, people were easier to come up with initiative and measure for participants. So actually from students, there were cases like, why shouldn't we, for example, make buildings more, choose buildings based on accessibility, including people with disability? Shouldn't we allocate rooms for people with disabilities closer to the gathering room? That may be typical abroad, but those ideas coming initially internally was something I thought was a benefit from the Orcom perspective. I'm not sure about judges, especially IAs, but as far as I know, I think we sort of did enjoy exploring motion from different angles, which we wouldn't have otherwise. So I hope that was a fulfilling experience for you. But I think the biggest benefit came from outside of the debating circuit. So one, there are more observers than before. So it's very difficult to promote debate tournament, especially competitive debating as a whole. But this year we had the biggest number of observers registering, and they were not necessarily interested in debating, but more interested in SDGs, but serve as a door opener in this specific way. So I thought that was a benefit. Last year, given that we were promoting SDGs, there were 3 media coverage last year. So I'm happy to say that Kyushu Debate Open was aired by local TV as well, although it was about 30 seconds to a minute. But I think that was a big progress last year. It was also interviewed by local newspapers, which did not happen in other ways. So debate not necessarily end within the debate circuit. Also, increase in sponsorship, which is monetary but important, did happen to a certain extent. Last year, we were able to do crowdfunding by tying to SDGs, which sort of was beneficial outside the debate circuit as well. I think numerically speaking, this was approximately 4,000 USD, so that's quite a lot of money. Also, this year, corporate and organized sponsorship has increased. Obviously, this is not necessarily solely attributed to SDGs. It's through the hard work of Orcom, having 4 people working in sponsorship team. But SDGs was easy. I feel it was an easier tool for them to sort of understand our importance of what we're doing. So that is the end of my presentation. So what I covered today was why SDGs is important for education events, how we should do it, and the result of Kyushu Debate Open. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, I know the content is a bit technical, so.
So I have one.
So would you tell me what's the debate Open's mission of SDG?
Mission of SDGs?
Yes, in the short form.
Mission of SDGs is to make the world sustainable even after Air 2030. Because it said that if the world continues and operates in this way, the world and business itself could never be sustainable. For instance, lack of resource, and due to climate change, we may have to live under the sea and those things. And I think perhaps some motions related to SDGs could be easier to understand. So for instance, the motion we had was, for example, this House believes that we should prioritize policies that seek to help people currently alive over those that seek to protect the future. It's something of the core part of SDGs, to think about the future generation. This was actually a grand final motion yesterday. But for instance, for example, we could talk about prohibition of predictive algorithms criminal trials. So through the AIs, this was angle of justice as how it's reserved. This is actually currently being debated at World Economic Forum, the biggest business forum in the world, to talk about whether this should be continued for the sake of humanity. So the mission is like that, specific examples could be like this. Any other questions?
Just one thing.
Yes.
Thank you for indicating the organization for Kyushu development. So that, and to indicate that, so this detail goals, such as the 16 and something. So this is continuously, so this is thanks, this is leads to the, so continue in the, to next year's.
Thank you. Yes, I totally agree. If I look at SDGs, like they're very heavily related to the sustainability as a tournament. So what I did cover was things like food access, which is beneficial for everyone, and I think you guys want to have good food. And I think if I look into it, there's many things that's heavily related, such as equity policy, for instance. When you talk about organizing committees, for instance, we could even talk about next year about, for example, plastic waste. And there are many things that could be done. And I hope this becomes the center of SDGs, although I know it's a bit burdensome and extra work.
Okay, other question?
Me.
Yes.
I'm not sure if my understanding is correct, but is it that the Kyushu University debate team actually set up a team of like sponsor officers so that they can contact corporations to get sponsorship? So I'm curious of how exactly that was done, because getting like corporate sponsorship for tournaments is pretty difficult in China, as in debating is an anonymous activity, and most of the corporations don't quite see the value, at least not yet, don't quite see the value of parliamentary debating in English, but we do think they're actually interested in the skill sets most of the debaters have, right? So how did you guys communicate with corporations?
Okay, maybe Miyu knows more, but as far as I know and how I oversee, so first we dedicated a specific team focusing on sponsorship team. So that was a member of 4 people, I presume, and one member was involved in Kyushu Debate Open for past 3 or 4 years, so they knew about what's going on and what's the benefit. And one person from this year was actually Professor Toru Oga, who made a presentation this morning, because so he knew about how to sort of convey outside of the non-debating circuit as well. And what we did was since from last year, we sort of made some specific slides as to sort of talk to corporations. I was involved to talk about some highlights, what debate is, what could be beneficial. What we also did this year and last year was sort of list up potential companies that could be interested. So we did more targeting companies. And so what we did was we looked into companies which were already sponsoring other debate activities, not this. So there is, for example, non-parliamentary debates, such as so-called academic debate that's being sponsored by newspaper companies, that's sponsored by educational companies, a tutor school. So those were on our list. We also took a list on local companies, such in Kyushu, because this is more about reviving Kyushu. So we took a look at the Kyushu local, very locally strong companies, not necessarily global companies. We thoroughly looked into companies which are committed to SDGs to sort of take their CSR budget as a possibility. What ultimately worked well was the first one, ultimately. So companies which, first and second one. So we got sponsors from Benesse, which is a tutor school in Japan, which has been actually sponsoring my other organization, coincidentally. So they were happy to do it because the global element and the education element, that's what they bought. With regard to the second one, I think the Kyushu element was something that was beneficial. I hope that answers your point.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Akira.
Thank you.